There are certain game elements that drive me nuts. At the top of that list is any form of an artificial time limit. I'm not talking about timed events where you have a certain amount of time to get something done, otherwise you lose. I'm talking about games where you have a certain amount of time to complete the game. This drives me nuts because I want to play a game at my own pace and not be told to hurry up. Some games that have this element include games like The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, Shin Megami Tensei, Persona 3 and 4, and Pandora's Tower. For the most part, they are set up so that you have to use every chance possible to be efficient or get ahead of the timer. Not to mention, if you screw up enough, these games pretty much tell you to start over or go back to a previous save point. Reccetear, an item shop tale, is one of those games that lays down everything to you, and you got to use your own resources to solve the problem. To add to it, it doesn't take away everything you have earned up to that point because one big plan didn't pan out. The development is pretty par for the course. It was developed by Easy Game Stations, published by Camp Folger LLC, and released on September 10th, 2010 to Steam. According to Wikipedia, Easy Game Station is a Japanese Doujin Soft company founded in 2001. For those who don't know what a Doujin Soft company is, let me put it short and sweet. They're basically the Japanese version of what we would call an independent game development studio. Besides that, they have mostly released titles that haven't been localized. The only two that have been localized are Chanticleers, A Tale of Two Sisters, and Reccetear, an item shop tale. Camp Folger LLC, on the other hand, is very much like Easy Game Station. They're an indie-level localization studio who haven't published that many games. So far, they have localized both of Easy Game Station's games and Fortune Summoner's Secret of the Elemental Stones. So with my lack of knowledge of how good of a game they could make, this combination could be really good or really bad. The story is pretty basic. You play as Reccetear, the daughter of a failed item shop owner. You have a big debt to pay and around a month to pay it off. Fortunately, the bank has allowed you to stay in business as long as you make payments on time. If you make the payments, then you get to keep the item shop. If not, then you get to live inside of a cardboard box. No pressure there, eh, buddy? The graphics feel like a game that is typically developed by a team like NIS. This can be a double-edged sword, however. On one hand, it's colorful, there's a lot of detail in the bosses, and it definitely looks pretty good in comparison to other independent games. On the other hand, it tends to blend in with other games like Disgaea, Shining in the Darkness, and Tele-Iris. So it depends how much of a fan of hack and slash games with JRPG elements are you. If you have played a lot of them, then it will lack reasons for you to remember it. On the other hand, it can and will stand on its own merits. My only other issue is that this game can look a bit repetitive. Since the game randomly generates its levels, like Dark Cloud or a roguelike, levels tend to recycle the same textures, monsters, and general look. This is not a huge deal if you've played this style of game before, but it can get tiresome after a few hours of exploring dungeons. The audio is good enough. All the voice acting is in Japanese, and I'll withhold my judgment on that. It can get repetitive because they say the same few lines over and over again, but it's more of a script writing issue than anything. The music, on the other hand, is pretty forgettable. Despite how much time I spend in the shop or in a dungeon, it doesn't really stand out. It's not terrible, but it's a lot to be desired. The gameplay is unique, but it's good in short bursts. There are two main elements to the game. First and foremost, the whole game revolves around the item shop. You start off with $1,000 and get a few items. Every time you set up items to open up a shop, you wheel and deal to make money. Early on, you can just buy or sell items. Later on, you have to deal with items being in high demand and cost you more and vice versa. You can create new items, you'll get orders for certain items, and so on. The most important part is the art of the deal. You got to extract the maximum out of the minimal. The game tells you to try to extract around 30% profit and only pay around 70% of what an item is worth. So the game gives you an idea how to succeed in the art of the deal. There's also another challenge in that you really got to play around every person that shows up. If you overcharge or undervalue their item just a little bit because of cost, then it might cost you a sale. My only problem is that this can get old. Wheeling and dealing with the same 5 or 6 people can get old after a while, especially when you consider that the same tactics work every single time. I can give it a pass when you consider how tedious being a shop owner can actually be in real life. Another feature is that as you complete sales, it increases your item shop's reputation. Make enough sales and you increase your shop's level. With each level up, it opens up options and adds a bit more diversity to the game along the way. The other aspect of the game is the dungeon crawling. You pay a mercenary a set amount of money based on their level, weapon, and armor to go into a dungeon and get items for you. You can loan them your own weapons and armor to use in the dungeon and get them back when they return. There's a few things you got to consider. The first is that if his HP goes to 0, you can only take back 1 item. Second, if you want to upgrade their weapon or armor, you got to sell them those items when they go shopping at your item shop. The last is that they can only carry a total of 25 items before you have to drop one to pick up another item. With that said, the dungeons play a lot like a 2D version of Dark Cloud. Floors are randomly generated, like I said, and you got to find an exit to get to the next floor. After every 5 floors, you can choose to continue on or go back to town, but you got to keep in mind that it takes up half an in-game day to use the dungeon, so you really got to play accordingly. Here's where this aspect of the game shows its flaws. The dungeons get repetitive. Enemies have one thing to keep an eye out for, and bosses only really have one pattern to learn. This makes fights tedious, boring, and makes you want them to get over with as soon as possible. Status effects only last a short time, making items like the strong anti-venom useless. So with all things considered, here's what I like about the game. The game is kind of unique and somewhat realistic. Running an item shop by yourself, it's quite hard. You got to manage requests, demands of customers, etc. And this can be realistically overbearing when you consider you gotta be both the guy who's finding stuff and selling stuff. The game doesn't have the most brutal time limit. Every action, like going to another shop, using the dungeon, costs a certain amount of time. It's not big of a time crunch as a game like Shin Megami Tensei Persona 3 or 4, but it requires you to be efficient on how you go about making money. Another bonus is that any items you have when your time runs up and you can't make the payment, you get to keep those items when the game restarts itself. This encourages you to play more and don't feel punished about you've just played for 5 to 15 hours just to get game over and quite possibly have to start the whole thing again. What I really got to be cautious about when recommending this game is that what you see is what you get. On one hand, if you like the concept of running an item shop, then this is your game. If you don't like the concept, you're going to hate it. This game can get repetitive, tedious, and very stressful, much like running a real shop. With that said, I advise you play this in bite-sized chunks. This is not a game you do a marathon run of. If you do, you'll get over-leveled and it'll get old way too fast. So keep this in mind when you play this game. Where I stand is in the middle. I appreciate what it does, but I can see where people can find it repetitive. Overall, Reccetear, an item shop tale, is an ambitious game with some problems. I like all the things it does uniquely, it's backed by good controls and a camera that doesn't hamper the experience. I just wish that it wasn't as repetitive, but this is a game you play in short bursts. It goes for around $22 Canadian, and if you have an itch for a JRPG or a decent hack and slash, I would give it a shot. I give it a 7.5 out of 10.